Okay, I've got a quick tutorial for you here on how to create data sets in S3 using Quilt 3, and we're going to use both the command line and IPython to do that creation. What I want to show you here is that I've got my folder with my data set here. I've got a few FCS files, always have a README. I've got my README markdown file, and I've got a CSV file, and I actually see some stray data that I don't want, so just remove that. So my data set is looking good. The next thing I'm going to do, I actually find it easier to push data sets to S3 without having to log into Quilt. And the way I do that is by setting my AWS profile. So I'm going to make sure that I have the right AWS profile set. And I'm actually not logged into Quilt here, and Quilt will automatically pick up your AWS IAM credentials. They're usually stored on disk. You can have as many profiles as you want. But making the shell command or executing the shell command actually tells AWS which credential set you want to use, and Quilt 3 will automatically pick that up. So now, if you're familiar with Git or Docker, there's a pretty clear metaphor for creating a data set. You just push it. And so this is the full command line syntax. I'm going to walk you through a few of the pieces here. So this is the name of the package that I'm creating. And a package is just a versioned instance of a data set. The registry argument tells me which S3 bucket I'm actually writing the data set to. --dir dot says I want you to grab all of the children or all the contents this is at the current location. And then the message, you will want to quote the message, because otherwise the bash shell will try and interpret the different elements of the string that comes there. So go ahead and quote that. And so when I run this, let's actually see what happens. So the first thing, there's some local hashing that happens. I've actually pushed this data set before, so that's why it was super fast. And let's look at a couple things here. So first is, if I actually visit the URL for the data set, I can see that all of my data is resident. And I've actually pushed it. You can see my commit message here. So that looks good. I've got the data set there, and then if we go back to the terminal for just a moment, there's one other command I want to make you familiar with, and it's the reason that the Quilt 3 client knows where the web catalog is. This is totally optional. You don't have to run a Quilt stack. Literally, if you just have Python and Amazon credentials, you can use Quilt 3 to talk directly to S3. But the one command I did run before, I'll show you, is I ran Quilt 3 config. And Quilt 3 config there, if you are running a catalog, again optional, will tell Quilt where you're pushing the data sets, and it will make some of the output a little bit nicer, as we've seen in this example. And if you choose to log into Quilt, it would also help you with service discovery. All right, so we've created the data set, and I want to do kind of the same thing now. I want to show you the Python API, which allows you to do the same things, but it's a little bit more powerful and a little bit more flexible. So if you need more control, if you want to set, for instance, metadata at the level of individual files, you can. It's a little bit easier to do that with Python. So here in my notebook, I'm just going to use the shell magic to set my AWS profile. I'm actually one directory level above my dataset directory, or the directory that contains the files I want to push. And let's go ahead and just import Quilt 3 here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create an empty package. So when I create that package, I just have an anonymous empty package here. And this can be pushed now to any registry or any S3 bucket. So I'm going to call this magical setdir call here. And I want to set the root of my current package to be whatever is in this, notice this folder up here, whatever is in this GTM-DS folder. Let's look at that. So what happens when I run that? Now P looks like it contains a pointer to all of the local files. So I've captured that data into my package. And it's pretty straightforward now. I can just go ahead and push this, and I'm going to push it to, let's see, where was the package name that we used before? We used acarv/dscli. Currently, we do require that package names have a slash in them, and it's usually, the convention is user/project name, but there's no, you can really use the package names any way that you want. So I'm going to go ahead and push that, and I do need to tell the Quilt API which S3 bucket I want to push to. So I've got it in my staging bucket there. And that is actually enough. And what I'd like to do now is go ahead and add let's say, another commit message. Let's say this is my, I don't know, third commit. And you do want to make your commit messages semantic, so when other human beings run into your data set, they can know what you did and why you did it. So let me go ahead and push that and see if that's okay. You notice we go through hashing, and again, the copying of the objects is super fast because Quilt is smart enough to know that those objects are already resident in S3. So let's look real quick. So now when I go here, I will find the data set, and I will also find the full revision history. And then just to show you how this round trips, if you have a colleague who would like to use your data set, well, first of all, they can download it in the CLI. That's what install will do. But you can also interact with it virtually. So if you have an extremely large data set, an extremely large package, there's a little bit more elegant way that you can interact with it. And let's just call this P2 here. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call the browse command. And the browse command actually gives me a virtualized view of the package. So all of this data is still resident in S3, and I'll show you the CSV file that I've got. If I actually use bracket notation to look at that, it'll tell me where that file is in S3. And I can do one better. I oftentimes will want to interact with this or play with this CSV as a pandas data frame. And actually, I think we have some fancy syntax for that. If I just do parentheses like that, that is equivalent to calling .deserialize. And Quilt will go out to S3 and it will pull all the bytes from the CSV and then it'll deserialize them for you. Yes, one other thing that you can do, let's just create a clean package here. Setdir is actually extremely flexible, and I'm going to show you what I mean. I can set dir, so again, let's say I want to put something in a data folder in my package. We're going to see how this works in just a second. The right-hand side argument of this can actually be anything in S3. So I don't necessarily have to have the data local. Let's say that I have a path in S3 that I want to capture in my package. So again, I've not copied any of this data locally, but what I can do is I can just set the right-hand side, I can set the right-hand side of my setdir call to be a path in S3. And I do need to be careful to add a URI so that Quilt knows where to find that data. And what this will actually do is this will create a package with pointers to data in S3. So again, when you create packages, you have the full flexibility to set the directory or set individual file contents to local file pointers, or what we would normally consider POSIX paths or local paths, or to S3 paths. And it's pretty straightforward, usually just a single command. All you need to know is quilt push, and you can run that either in the CLI or you can run it in Python.